Hi, my name is Santia. They say family protects you, but mine left me in a wrecked SUV, unconscious, bleeding, my legs shattered, because my brother crashed drunk, and it was easier to say I wasn't there than to face what they'd done. They told the police, everyone got out safe. Then they filed the insurance claim, split the money, and went to brunch like I'd never existed. I spent 8 weeks in a coma while they told the world I'd chosen to disappear. But if I was so easy to forget, why did they go so far to make sure no one came looking? What else have they buried? And who did they bury before me? They say your life flashes before your eyes in moments like that. But for me, it wasn't the past I saw. It was everything I thought was ahead. My diploma, still warm in my hands just hours earlier, the job offer waiting for me in New Jersey, my mother's proud tears, my father's reluctant smile. All of it, dangling like a promise someone snatched away too soon.
Earlier that day, I had walked across the stage at Savannah State, nerves twisting my stomach as I clutched the edge of my gown. I was the first Elwood to graduate college, and not just graduate, summa cum laude in biomedical engineering. It should have felt like I made it. For a moment it did. Mama, Verna, kept adjusting my curls even after the cap was on. She'd cried through most of the ceremony. Dad, Carlton, just kept snapping photos, barking things like, "Stand up straighter," and "Smile for once, Blaine." My brother, always the star in their eyes, stood beside me like I'd borrowed his spotlight for the day. Still, he clinked his soda glass to mine at the reception and said, "Guess the nerd finally made it." We went to this fancy southern restaurant they liked. Leather booths, high ceilings, gospel jazz playing too softly. It was Carlton's treat, which meant it was about to be all about him. And Blaine.
The waitress brought out shrimp and grits that cost more than I used to make in a week. Carlton raised a glass and toasted Blaine's business expansion, Blaine's steady hands under pressure. Not a word about me or the internship at Johnson & Johnson I was due to start in 6 weeks. Every time I tried to speak, Mama changed the subject. She asked about Sister Willis's daughter getting married, about the church picnic next weekend. When I finally said I'd be leaving soon for Newark, she smiled politely and said, "Lord willing, baby." Blaine kept ordering whiskey sours, loud enough that the waiter side-eyed him. Sometime around dessert, the rain started. Not just a drizzle, thick, hammering rain that drowned out everything else. Carlton suggested waiting it out, but Blaine waved him off. "I've driven in worse," he slurred. "Little rain ain't gonna kill nobody." We all climbed into Blaine's SUV. I sat in the middle of the back seat, my diploma on my lap, my cap in my purse, the remnants of celebration sticking to my dress. RB hummed from the speakers, Luther or Marvin, I can't remember which. Mama hummed along. Blaine laughed at something Carlton said, and for a split second, I thought maybe this was how normal families felt. Then Blaine took the curve too fast. I remember the tires skidding, the screaming, the tree that grew from the darkness like a monster. Blaine shouted something I didn't catch. Mama grabbed the dashboard. I tried to brace my leg. It didn't help. Metal screamed. Glass burst around me. My body slammed against the seatbelt. My left leg folded underneath the front seat, bones crunching so loud I heard them over the music. My vision went white. Then, nothing. I don't know how long I was out. When I came to, the rain hadn't stopped. The air smelled like copper and gasoline. My head throbbed. Something warm trickled down my cheek. My mouth tasted like iron. The world was upside down, literally. The SUV had flipped. I blinked through the cracked windshield, hoping to see someone, anyone. "Mama?" I rasped. No answer. I tried again, louder. "Daddy?" Pain stabbed through my ribs. I moved my arms. One was fine, the other screamed when I twisted. My leg was stuck. I couldn't feel my toes. I called for Blaine. Then I screamed. Nothing. Just the wind and the static hum of a dying engine. I managed to pull myself halfway up, despite the pain slicing through every nerve. That's when I noticed. No one else was there. No bodies. No blood on the other seats. No jackets. No shoes. The door beside Blaine's seat hung open, swinging in the storm. And then it hit me. They'd left. Blaine, my mother, my father. They got out, and they left me there, bleeding, pinned, half-conscious. They walked away. For a second, I told myself they went for help. But that thought crumbled when I remembered the look. Blaine had turned once, just as I came to, his face half in shadow, one hand clutching his ribs. He looked right at me, and then he turned his back and limped into the woods. I don't know how long I lay there, trying to convince myself it wasn't what it was. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 3 hours. But I do know the moment the rain started pounding harder, the exact moment my body started shaking from the cold and blood loss. I stopped waiting for them. I thought maybe the police would find me. I imagined the flashing red lights cutting through the trees, the paramedics rushing to lift the dashboard off my leg. But that didn't happen. What happened was worse. What happened was I remembered something else. In my mind, I saw Mama's voice, calm and sure, as she spoke to someone on a cell phone. "All of us got out safe," she said. I imagined Carlton nodding next to her, his suit jacket somehow dry, saying something about not wanting to involve the authorities just yet. And Blaine, his face still smug despite the limp, adding, "It was nothing serious." I imagined the officer believing them. No police report, no ambulance, no search, because according to them, I wasn't there. And just like that, I slipped under again. This time, I wasn't sure I'd ever wake up. But if they thought I'd disappear quietly, they didn't know me at all. That was the thought that clung to me like condensation on a hospital window as I floated somewhere between awareness and something else. I wasn't awake, but I wasn't completely gone either. There were voices now and then, sometimes gentle, sometimes clinical. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Time didn't seem to mean much. The only thing I was sure of was pain, distant, dull, ever present like a low-grade fever that never broke. Then one morning, at least I think it was morning, the world stopped being a blur and snapped into focus. I woke up to the soft sound of a machine clicking beside me, followed by the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. My mouth was dry, my body felt foreign, and my leg, my left leg, was wrapped, suspended, and aching from somewhere deep inside. The ceiling above me was an eggshell white. A TV mounted in the corner of the room was off. Light filtered through half-open blinds, suggesting a sun I hadn't seen in days or weeks. I blinked again, harder this time, and that's when I heard her voice. Well, look who decided to rejoin us. It wasn't my mother, wasn't a nurse I recognized, but there was warmth in the tone, and when I turned my head slightly, I saw her, an older black woman, maybe in her 60s, wearing blue scrubs that had faded at the elbows and a lanyard full of religious pins. "I'm Rose," she said, walking over. "Rose Maybelline. I've been sitting with you most days." "You scared the whole staff." I opened my mouth, but only a croak came out. She quickly poured water into a cup with a straw and held it to my lips. "Slow," she warned. "That throat hasn't worked in a while." The water tasted like metal. Still, it felt like salvation. I managed to whisper, "How long?" She looked at me kindly, but there was a shadow in her eyes. "Almost 8 weeks, honey. You've been out since the wreck. 8 weeks, 2 months, and in all that time, I swallowed hard. "Did my mama come?" Rose paused. She didn't flinch or pretend she didn't understand the question. She simply set the cup down, gently pulled the chair closer to my bed, and said, "No, baby, not once. Just me." A breath caught in my throat. Not from surprise. I think, deep down, I already knew, but from the sheer weight of the confirmation. "Some folks," she added, her voice lower now, "don't deserve the children they're given." That sentence sat in the air like a sermon without an altar. She stayed with me a while longer that day, told me how she retired from full-time nursing, but still volunteered a few shifts a week, said she'd been there the night they brought me in, that she kept coming back because something in her gut told her I wasn't ready to leave this world just yet. And then she said something that stuck. "Sometimes God leaves a witness." I clung to that, because apparently he hadn't left me much else. The doctors came in later, faces I didn't recognize, full of cautious optimism and medical jargon. "Multiple surgeries," they said.
My femur had been shattered. 3 ribs cracked, a mild concussion, but my cognitive function seemed intact. They explained I'd been in the ICU for nearly 2 months, listed under unconfirmed identity for most of it. No one had answered their emergency contact calls. No one had come to sign paperwork. No visitors, aside from Rose. "You're lucky to be alive," one of the doctors said. "Most people wouldn't have survived being trapped that long, especially with the blood loss and exposure." I nodded numbly. Lucky didn't feel like the right word. Later that day, I asked to make a phone call. It took some effort, but the nurse brought me a landline phone and placed it beside the bed. My hands were weak, trembling as I dialed. I knew the number by heart. I'd called it for rides, for holiday recipes, for reassurance before midterms. I hadn't called it in months, not since graduation. Not since the day they left me behind. It rang twice. Then a familiar voice picked up. Verna. My mother. "Hello?" "Mama," I whispered. My throat burned. "It's me. It's Santia." There was a pause. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Enough time to register. Enough time to know. "I think you have the wrong line," she said, calm as Sunday, and she hung up. I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply stared at the wall across from me, where a muted reflection of my own face stared back in the window, not angry, not broken, just emptied out. Rose came in minutes later. She must have seen something in my face because she didn't ask. She just sat beside me, took my hand, and whispered, "Whatever it was, they weren't worth you." But she was wrong. They were my family. They were supposed to be worth everything. I didn't say much for the rest of that day. I let the doctors talk. I let the nurses poke and prod and take blood and chart vitals. But inside, a quiet storm was building, one that no medication could quiet. Verna knew my voice. She recognized it. A mother doesn't forget the sound of her own child. She knew. She chose not to know. And that was the real crash. Because the car could be fixed. The bones could heal. But that silence on the other end of the line, that calculated erasure, that was the moment I truly became orphaned. That night, as rain began tapping the windows again, I stared out into the darkness, refusing to close my eyes. They didn't just leave me, I thought. They made sure I wouldn't come back. And if they thought I'd disappear quietly, they didn't know me at all. I wasn't erased. I was buried. And now I was digging my way out. It was late. The kind of late where the hospital halls were empty except for a cleaning cart left unattended near the nurses' station. My room smelled like antiseptic and lemon wipes. Rain clung to the windows like a stain. I sat propped up on too many pillows, legs still in traction, feeling like a guest in someone else's body. The TV across from me played a rerun of a cooking show with the volume turned low. The only light came from the hallway and the dim blue glow of the vitals monitor next to my bed. I didn't need noise. I needed silence to think. And I had too much of it. Memories don't come back all at once. They trickle in, like water from a faucet that's been off too long. 1 minute, you're watching a nurse adjust your IV. The next, you're 6 years old in the back of your parents' van, listening to your brother explain why he got to sit in the front again. I used to think I was just the quiet one. Easygoing, the one who didn't start trouble. The one who stayed in her room and got her work done. The one who didn't make things harder for anyone. The tag-along. But now, with each passing day, I realized that wasn't how they saw me. I wasn't the quiet one. I was the disposable one. That night came back to me piece by piece. Blaine yawning behind the wheel, Mama turning back to ask about the internship, Carlton saying, "Don't baby her, she's grown now." And then the sound, tires screaming, glass exploding. My own voice caught in my throat. That crash didn't just break my bones. It cracked open something deeper, something that had been simmering for years. I hadn't mattered to them unless I was convenient. When I became a liability, they didn't hesitate. They moved on. A nurse named Kendra came in around midnight to check my blood pressure. Young, quick, cheerful, like the job hadn't worn her down yet. She glanced at my chart and said, "Oh, by the way,
Your family already signed the AMA waiver. My hand tightened around the blanket. What waiver? I asked. She blinked. The against medical advice release? Said you chose to stay behind after graduation. Something about staying with friends? My stomach turned. They said that? My voice was so calm, it scared me. She nodded, confused. That's what's in the file. Want me to show you? I didn't answer, but she must have taken my silence as consent. A few minutes later, a tablet was placed on the overbed tray and the digital record pulled up. Right there, Verna Elwood had signed off. The hospital log marked me as left voluntarily, no medical care needed, and then the insurance record. The claim filed listed the vehicle as a total loss. No injuries reported. All occupants accounted for. My name wasn't there. Not in the hospital log, not in the emergency response report, not in the insurance claim. It was like I'd never existed at all. I stared at that screen like it had slapped me, because in a way, it had. In the morning, a social worker named Denise came by to talk about post-release planning. She had kind eyes, but moved like someone who knew she wasn't allowed to stay long. Toward the end of our meeting, her voice dropped. I'm not supposed to say this, she murmured, glancing toward the door. But I saw your case. That SUV was a mess. Claimed totaled within 24 hours. The payout went through in record time. That only happens when no one's injured. I said nothing, just tilted my head. She hesitated. They didn't include you, not as a passenger, not as anything. So they told them I wasn't in the car, I said. Her lips pressed together. Then, a slow nod. I don't think they expected you to wake up. By lunchtime, my hands had stopped shaking. Not because I was calm, because I was calculating. That afternoon, Rose came by again, just like she always did. She brought me a cup of warm ginger tea and asked if I wanted her to read a psalm like usual. But I wasn't in the mood for scripture. I was in the mood for facts. Did anyone from my family call while I was out? I asked. She looked at me carefully. Just once, about 4 weeks ago. Left a voicemail. I saved it. You want to hear it? I nodded. She handed me her phone. I pressed play. It was Verna's voice, calm, unhurried, like she was leaving a message for a neighbor about a borrowed casserole dish. We believe she may have stayed with friends after graduation. If she contacts you, please let us know. We thought she was dead. I stared at the phone long after the message ended. We thought she was dead. That was what my own mother had said. Not, we've been worried. Not, please help us find her. Just a gentle suggestion that I'd vanished by choice, that no search was needed, no questions necessary. They didn't file a missing person report. They filed an insurance claim. They didn't drive back to the crash site. They drove straight to the bank. And somehow, none of it surprised me. Later that evening, as the sky turned purple behind the blinds, I asked to see the original insurance documents. I didn't say why, but Rose had contacts in admin. She made a call. An hour later, a paper copy was slid under my tray. There it was again. No injuries, all occupants safe. Signature line, Carlton Elwood. I traced his name with my index finger. No rage, no screaming, no panic, just clarity. They erased me on paper. Now I'd write myself back in ink they couldn't wash out. If they wouldn't give me justice, I'd take it, pixel by pixel, post by post. A week had passed since I first opened my eyes in that sterile room and discovered the truth. Since then, every hour had been filled with quiet work, documenting details, noting inconsistencies, replaying conversations in my mind. My body was healing, slowly, but my brain was sharper than ever. Pain sharpened it. I kept a notebook on the tray by my bed. In it, I sketched timelines, listed names, nurses, surgeons, EMTs, and jotted down every fragment of memory that returned, no matter how small. I wasn't just remembering. I was building a case, my own case. Rose brought me a care package that morning, some homemade banana bread wrapped in foil, a packet of tissues, and a tiny hand lotion that smelled like lavender. Don't ask where it came from, she said with a wink, but I don't think it was from the staff. I smiled faintly. There was something about the way she said it that told me it came from someone watching their conscience fall apart. That was fine. Let them squirm. Later that afternoon, a nurse I hadn't seen before came in to check my vitals. Younger than most, with short curls under her cap and a habit of humming to herself. She glanced at my chart, then at me. "You're not in the Elwood family group thread anymore?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Oh," she said quickly, flustered. "Sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. I used to work at the same church your mom's in. I remember seeing Blaine's posts. He'd always share pictures of his dog in the group. Thought you were in it too." My voice dropped. "What's the name of the group?" "Elwood 4, I think," she answered casually, then froze at my expression. "It got renamed right after the crash. I just assumed." My heart was thudding in my ears, but I kept my face still. "No, it's fine. Thank you." She left a few minutes later. I waited until the hallway was quiet again before grabbing the iPad Rose had helped me set up. It was slow, probably an older model, but it still had my cloud backup, still linked to the same Apple ID I'd used since college. I scrolled. There it was. The group chat. Elwood 5, created 3 years ago, when Mama insisted the whole family needed one for prayer updates and news. I hadn't looked at it in months. And there, clear as day, 4 messages from Carlton, 2 days after the accident, with the group name changed to Elwood 4. No explanation. I clicked on the member list. My name, my icon, was missing. They didn't wait until I was buried. They didn't wait for proof I was dead. They deleted me while the blood was still wet on the seat. I screenshotted it all. The date of the name change, the absence of my account, the cheerful posts that followed, a dog picture, a church event flyer, Blaine laughing at a barbecue. Then I went to my email, created a new folder, and labeled it Evidence. That night, after the halls quieted down and the last round of meds kicked in, I dialed the number I hadn't touched since that first call. My hand didn't shake this time. I was done asking questions. I had answers. Verna answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello?" "It's me," I said. Silence. She didn't hang up. "I saw the claim," I said evenly. "The group chat. The hospital waiver. The voicemail you left telling people I stayed with friends. I know what you did." Another pause. Then her voice, steady. "You should have protected yourself better." I waited. "I was unconscious." "That doesn't change anything," she replied. "Blaine didn't mean for any of this. You always needed saving. That's the thing with you, Sancha. You never learned to stand on your own." I felt the air leave my lungs, not from hurt, but from disbelief, the kind you feel when you realize someone's soul has rusted so thoroughly, nothing shines anymore. "You're right," I said, my voice flat. "I didn't stand on my own. I stood on loyalty, and you knocked that out from under me." She said nothing. "Don't speak to me again," I added, "unless you're ready to say it under oath." Then I hung up. I didn't cry, didn't throw anything. Instead, I turned to the hospital-provided laptop and opened a new browser tab. I found the form for anonymous whistleblower complaints on the Georgia State Insurance Board's website. Within 15 minutes, I'd uploaded screenshots, dates, and a brief statement. The following claim is fraudulent. The passenger, Sansia Elwood, was critically injured and omitted from all records. I used a pseudonym, but I attached copies of the discharge report and digital files that left no room for doubt. The next morning, I logged into an old social account I hadn't touched since before graduation. I didn't know why. Habit, maybe. It was still linked to my mother's page. She had never removed me as her child, but she had made her own post 2 days after the crash. It was there in her timeline, neatly written with her favorite Bible verse at the end. "God protects his faithful. So glad all my babies are safe." Attached was a photo of Verna, Carlton, and Blaine, smiling at brunch. My name wasn't mentioned. No caption, no acknowledgement, just their faces, their full plates, their new version of reality. I stared at it for a long time. Then I whispered, "I'm the deleted caption." But they weren't done yet. When cornered, cowards claw. The next few days moved like they were wrapped in gauze. soft, slow, with every sound a little too far away, every voice a little too calm. I stayed in my hospital room, answering questions from nurses, checking in with physical therapists, eating what I could manage. But my focus had narrowed. Every breath, every movement was building toward one thing, proving I was there, that I had been in that car, that I mattered, not just to me, but enough to put my name back where they tried to erase it. It started with a call to an old classmate from my undergrad days. Maddie used to work on campus maintenance and kept side jobs fixing up junked cars for cash. And he still owed me for helping him pass Calc 2. When I called him and asked if he could help track down my family's SUV, he didn't hesitate, said he'd make a few calls to some salvage yards and see what he could find. The next day, Maddie called me back. They auctioned it, Sanchia. The frame was twisted. Nobody was going to rebuild it. I kept my voice steady. Was anything still inside? He paused. Some junk in the glove box. But get this, they found a working dash cam mounted near the rearview mirror. Real clean pull. The yard tech said it powered back on without needing a reset. I didn't blink. Can you get me a copy? 3 hours later, I had it in my inbox. I waited until the nurses finished their evening rounds and the halls grew quiet. I pulled the headphones over my ears, opened the file, and watched. It was shaky, low-res, but unmistakable. There was my face, smiling, laughing at something Blaine had said. My graduation cap rested on my lap, one tassel twirling lazily as we hit a small bump. Mama turned around in her seat, her voice clear. "Baby, how's that internship looking?" I heard myself say, "I start next month," and she nodded, proud. Then the camera caught Blaine in the driver's seat. His head dipped once, just for a second. His hand jerked the wheel. The rest unfolded in silence. The tree, the spin, the crunch. The screen went black. I sat back in the bed, breath slow and measured. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. "There I am," I whispered. "You can't erase that." The next morning, I sent the video to Marla Kinsey, a civil attorney I found online who specialized in family-based injury claims. I didn't expect her to respond quickly. She did, in 27 minutes. I heard it in her voice before she said a word. She was rattled. "This isn't just negligence," she said. "This is intentional concealment. This is coordinated fraud. And it's personal." "I know," I replied. "Are you willing to take the case?" A pause. Then, "Absolutely. I'll file today." Over the next 48 hours, we pulled together everything. My hospital records, the audio of Verna's voicemail, the insurance documentation, the screenshots of the family group chat, the video from the dash cam. Marla assembled them like a crime board, layering timelines and facts until the pattern emerged so clearly even a blind man would flinch. Then we filed suit. Verna Elwood, Carlton Elwood, Blaine Elwood. Charges: insurance fraud, reckless endangerment, emotional distress, willful omission, attempted civil erasure. The day of the preliminary hearing, I wore a navy blouse and slacks. No makeup. My leg brace was still visible under the hem. I used a cane to walk into the courtroom. People stared, some in curiosity, some in recognition. A few looked away. Carlton sat stiff, jaw clenched like he was chewing on a lemon rind. Verna looked like she was in mourning, black dress, pearl earrings, lips tight. Blaine had on a sports coat and a haircut that screamed damage control. The judge asked if I had anything I wished to say. I stood up, slowly, carefully, and faced the bench. "My name is Sanchia Elwood. I am not missing. I was never lost. I was left behind, on purpose. And now, I choose to leave them." Then I sat down. No drama, no tears, just truth. The press caught wind of it by evening. Local news ran with the headline, "Daughter accuses family of abandonment after near-fatal crash." Blaine deleted all his social media within the day. Verna posted a vague quote about forgiveness and storms on her Facebook page, followed by a prayer hand emoji. Carlton released a one-line statement to the newspaper. "We categorically deny these allegations and will address them through the legal system." But people weren't fooled. Someone reposted the brunch photo. Then another user zoomed in on the 3 empty mimosas at the table and asked, "Where's the sister?" The comments grew. So did the reach. Somebody dug up old photos of my graduation, compared timestamps, noted the sudden lack of posts about me after June. Questions flooded in like a broken dam. And me? I stayed silent. The next hearing was 2 weeks later. I exited the courthouse and spotted Rose in the parking lot, waiting in her old Camry. I slid into the passenger seat and exhaled slowly, fingers resting on the edge of the window. Rose didn't say anything right away. Then she turned slightly toward me and asked, "You ready for them to really hate you now?" I smiled without looking at her. "They started it," I said. "I'm just finishing the caption." But Blaine wasn't the type to spray paint. He preferred knives in backs. When I opened the door that morning and saw the red paint, my first thought wasn't fear. It was familiarity. That shade of red, the kind they use on discount signs and clearance stickers. It stood out against the beige of my apartment door like a siren. The words were loud, ugly, and stupidly spelled. "Ungrateful bitch." I stared at it for a few seconds, then stepped back, grabbed my phone, and took a picture. I didn't flinch. I didn't clean it up. Instead, I walked back inside, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the window while the mug warmed my hands. The city buzzed outside, cars honking, trash trucks backing up, someone yelling at a barking dog down the block. Life moved. So did I. A few hours later, I called Marla. She answered on the second ring, her voice clipped but alert. "They're escalating," I said simply. There was a brief silence. Then, "I figured they would." We agreed not to report the vandalism to the police. Yet, let them show their hand first. That afternoon, a courier dropped off an envelope. It was hand-delivered, no return address, but the handwriting on the label was familiar. I opened it on the kitchen counter. Inside was a letter written in blue ink on creamy paper, the kind that made you think of weddings or baby showers. The handwriting looked like Verna's, but neater, more polished, too polished. The letter started with my name, underlined, like a school assignment. The first line read, "We are sorry for everything that happened." It went on to describe how the accident was a tragedy, how emotions ran high, how mistakes were made. It spoke of grief, of confusion, of complex family dynamics. It mentioned Blaine's struggle with trauma and addiction. It ended with, "We love you, always have, always will." Mom. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. Then I scanned it and emailed it to Marla with a single line, "Tell me what you think." 2 days later, Marla called. "It's not real," she said. "I figured." She explained that Verna had signed it, yes, but the structure, tone, and vocabulary were textbook damage control. She said it was dictated, probably by Carlton's legal team, an attempt to mitigate public backlash, maybe sway future court outcomes. "They've moved from lies of omission," I said, "to manufactured contrition." Marla didn't laugh, neither did I. The next blow came out of nowhere, an anonymous email, no subject line, no signature, just a single sentence and a PDF attachment. "I thought you should know what he did at the hospital." The PDF was a screenshot of internal messages between hospital administration. I scanned them quickly, eyes catching key phrases. Mr. Elwood insisted no further documentation was needed. Patient appeared to be resting, no urgency indicated. Don't escalate to authorities. Per donor relationship, best to wait. I stared at the screen, a cold flush rising from my stomach to my neck. Carlton had paid off the hospital, or maybe he'd just reminded them of his donations. Either way, he'd used his influence to keep my file buried. He didn't just erase me at home, he erased me medically, legally, structurally. Even the people paid to protect me were convinced to stand down. By evening, the internet caught fire. Justice for Sanchia trended on local threads. A podcast host reached out, someone who covered small-town corruption and cover-ups. Her message was simple. Your story matters. You're not alone. That night, I sat in my dim living room, pulled my hair back into a loose bun, positioned my phone on the windowsill, and hit record. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't filter the light.
My name is Sanchia Elwood, I said. 2 months ago, I was left to die in a car wreck by my family. Since then, they've told the world I was never there, that I chose to leave, that I made it all up. I paused. This isn't about revenge. This is about truth, about being unburied, about knowing that no matter how carefully they write you out, the truth stays written somewhere. Then I uploaded the dashcam footage, just a still, a frame frozen 3 minutes before the crash. I was laughing. My cap was in my lap. Mama was asking me about my internship. I didn't add commentary, didn't need to. The next morning, I woke up to hundreds of notifications. People were resharing the image, commenting, asking questions, some with disbelief, some with fire. Later that night, I heard a knock. I didn't answer. I waited. The knock didn't come again. But when I stepped into the hallway 20 minutes later to take out the trash, I saw it. Someone had come back. Not to apologize, but to double down. A small envelope had been taped to my door. Inside was a church bulletin, this Sunday's service. On the back, someone had scribbled in red ink, "Let go. Families forgive. You're destroying God's work." No name, no address. I tossed it in the trash. I wasn't destroying anything. I was exposing it. They were about to see just how dangerous a girl they buried could be. The morning after the paint, after the envelope with the church bulletin, after Carlton's quote hit the news, I checked my messages while pouring oatmeal into a chipped bowl. My phone buzzed again. A new message, this one from an unknown number. But it wasn't a threat. Not another passive-aggressive note wrapped in righteousness. This one was from someone I hadn't heard from in nearly a year, Trina Lowen. The message was simple. "I miss you. Can we talk?" I stared at it longer than I should have. Trina and I used to be inseparable. She knew every fear I'd ever spoken aloud. She was there when I failed my first chemistry exam, there when I broke up with my college boyfriend, there when Blaine gave me the cold shoulder for forgetting to pick up his dry cleaning. She knew the texture of my silence, the shape of my hope. And when the crash happened, she vanished. Until now. I didn't reply immediately. I went through the rest of my day. Therapy, case prep with Marla, a short walk around the block to test my brace. I needed the hours to remind myself that not everyone who smiles is safe. That evening, I texted her back. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the coffee shop on East Liberty. It was a neutral space. Public. I made sure Rose knew where I was going. I arrived early and picked a corner booth, sat with my back to the wall. Old habits. Trina walked in 3 minutes late. Her blonde curls were tied up, lipstick just bright enough to say, "I'm okay." She smiled like nothing had happened, like no time had passed. "Sanchia," she said softly, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look strong." I raised an eyebrow. "Stronger than dead?" She flinched, just barely. "I didn't mean—" "Forget it." I stirred my tea. "You wanted to talk, so talk." She exhaled. "I didn't know what to believe. Your mom told people you'd gone to visit friends. Blaine said the crash wasn't serious. I thought you just needed time." "You were there, weren't you?" I asked, tone even. She went still. "After the accident," I continued, "you saw Blaine. He was limping. He was alone." Trina's eyes dropped. "I saw him walking up the side road. His shirt was torn. I asked where you were. He just said, 'Handled.' Then your mom told me not to say anything. She said they'd already filed the claim. That it would cause more harm than good to reopen it. And you just listened. I thought they'd go back for you." I stared at her for a long, cold second. "They didn't. And you didn't." Trina's face twisted. "I was scared, okay? Carlton's got power in this town. Blaine's the golden boy. I'm nobody." "No," I cut in. "You were my friend. That used to mean something." I stood up, pulled a 20 from my wallet, and set it on the table. "You had your chance to be a friend," I said. "You chose safety. I'll never forget that." Then I walked out. I didn't look back. Back at home, hours later, The weight of her betrayal hadn't settled. It was still hovering somewhere behind my ribs, sharp and bitter. I was sitting by the window again, watching cars roll past below, when my inbox pinged. No subject. Encrypted sender. I hesitated, then opened it. The message was short. I know the truth. I was there. I saw Blaine. I saw Carlton meet the EMT. They didn't just leave you. They lied to stop the responders from checking the back seat. I couldn't live with it. I left town. But you weren't the only one they erased. It was signed simply, Nico. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't tremble. But something deep in me shifted. Something old and frozen cracked open. I forwarded the email to Marla within minutes. She called 10 minutes later. We're tracing the IP, she said. It's pinging from out of state. Looks real. Could be the witness we need. Could be more than that, I said. Could be proof I wasn't the only target. There was a pause on the line. Then Marla said, I think we need to expand the scope. If there are others, I know, I said. And if Blaine and Carlton tried this before, we're not just dealing with a family secret, we're dealing with a pattern. The next day, the news broke wider. A headline popped up on my screen. Elwood family under investigation for insurance fraud. Cover-up allegations resurface. I clicked into the article. There was a quote from Carlton. This has gone far enough. My daughter needs help, not attention. I leaned back in my chair. They still thought I was weak. Let them. I had the truth. I had names. I had people like Rose, like Marla, like that anonymous email, like the growing threads online where people were saying, I knew something didn't add up. And this reminds me of my own story. I wasn't alone. And I wasn't waiting anymore. They'd see. The world now knew who I was, but I was still figuring out who I wanted to become. The morning of the trial, I woke up before the sun. Not because I was nervous. I'd burned through nerves weeks ago. What kept me awake was something quieter, sharper. The knowing. Rose had picked up a navy blouse for me from a consignment shop down the street. It fit well enough and didn't make me look like I was playing dress-up for court. I wore it with a pair of pressed slacks, my brace visible beneath the hem. I didn't want to hide it. I didn't owe anyone comfort. Marla picked me up at 8 on the dot. She didn't talk much during the drive. Neither did I. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that exists between women who have already said what mattered. When we pulled up to the courthouse, the sidewalk was lined with reporters, their cameras aimed like weapons. A few had signs. One read, "She was left behind." Another said, "No justice without her name." I didn't look at them. I didn't wave. I walked through the front doors, each step measured, my cane clicking softly against the marble floor. Inside, Blaine sat at the defendant's table, flanked by his lawyer and wearing a suit too tight in the shoulders. Verna sat beside Carlton, her pearls too white against the black of her dress. Carlton looked like he was at a board meeting that had taken a wrong turn. I took my seat beside Marla, keeping my face blank. I didn't want them to see my rage, my sadness, my satisfaction. I wanted them to see a void and realize they put it there. The prosecution started by calling Nurse Rose. She spoke with the same clarity and grace she always had. She told them how she'd found me unresponsive, bloodied, broken, and alone. She recounted the 8 weeks she'd prayed beside my bed while no family came. Then they brought in Kevin Harper, the delivery driver who found the SUV. He described the scene in grim detail. The dashboard collapsed, glass everywhere, me unconscious, my leg twisted in a way no one forgets. He said he thought he'd found a body, not a survivor. The courtroom was quiet. Nobody whispered, nobody coughed. Then came the dashcam footage. Marla queued it up and turned the screen toward the judge. The playback was silent, but it didn't need sound. The video showed everything. Me laughing in the back seat, Mama turning around to ask about my internship, Blaine tapping the wheel, eyes drooping, the spin, the tree, the crash. And then, nothing. People gasped. Someone in the back stifled a sob. Verna stared at the screen. Carlton's hands stayed folded in front of him, knuckles white. Then Marla stood and handed the court clerk a small thumb drive. Your Honor, this final piece is a personal recording from Nurse Maybelline, taken during the plaintiff's time in ICU.
Permission was granted. The judge nodded. The clerk hit play. My voice came through faint but clear, like it had been plucked from a dream. "Why didn't you come back for me?" Gasps again. But this time, the silence after was heavier. Verna looked down for the first time since the trial began. On cross-examination, Carlton tried to hold firm, but under pressure, he cracked. "We were scared," he muttered. "We didn't think she'd survive. Blaine could have gone to prison. We didn't know what to do." The judge didn't miss a beat. "So you prioritized your son's criminal record over your daughter's life?" Carlton blinked, caught in the weight of his own words. He said nothing more. The judge took 30 minutes before returning with the verdict. Blaine Elwood is hereby sentenced to 6 years in state prison for reckless endangerment, obstruction of justice, and insurance fraud. My brother didn't flinch. Verna and Carlton Elwood are ordered to pay $850,000 in damages to the plaintiff, Sansia Elwood, for coordinated concealment and willful emotional harm. The courtroom buzzed. I sat still. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. Afterward, the press swarmed, but I didn't stop to speak. I walked out of the courthouse with Rose on one side and Marla on the other. As we reached the steps, Verna called after me. "We loved you!" she cried, voice cracking. I paused, turned slowly. "Then maybe you should have acted like it." I didn't wait for her reply. As we stepped onto the sidewalk, I saw him, a figure in the crowd, hood up, standing off to the side, watching. His eyes met mine for just a moment. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just nodded once and disappeared. Nico. The one who saw what they did. The one who spoke up when no one else would. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to. Justice doesn't erase scars. But it gives you back your name. The world now knew who I was, but I was still figuring out who I wanted to become. It had been 13 months since the verdict. Savannah had started warming early that year. The mornings were already thick with humidity by 7 a.m., and even the bricks on the old buildings seemed to sweat. But inside the corner cafe on Abercorn and Park, it was always just cool enough, just soft enough, for people to sit a little longer than they meant to. Jazz crackled from a vintage record player tucked near the bookshelf. The smell of fresh cinnamon rolls floated out from the kitchen like an invitation. A gold-lettered sign on the front window said it all. Second Dawn. The cafe had taken 6 months to open. Not because I lacked funds, I had the judgment money, sure, but because I needed to make sure it wasn't built out of anger. I didn't want revenge stamped into the drywall. I wanted something quieter. Something built out of what was left of me after they'd tried to bury everything. That morning, I wore jeans, a black apron with flour smudged on the front, and a loose braid that fell down my shoulder. I still limped, some days worse than others, but I never hid it. Every step reminded me I'd walked out of that car when nobody else thought I would. The bell above the front door jingled. I looked up from behind the counter. Kevin Harper stood there in his usual cargo jacket, faded cap in hand. I didn't say a word. I walked out from behind the counter and hugged him. A full hug, not the side kind, not the polite squeeze. The kind you give a person who handed you your life back. He chuckled against my shoulder. "Well, I guess I should show up more often." I stepped back, smiling. "You showed up when it counted." He looked around the cafe, eyes scanning the mismatched furniture, the bookshelf filled with donated paperbacks, the jar on the counter labeled, "Help Survivors Start Again." "This place is something else," he said, voice low. I nodded. "I never thanked you properly." "You did," he said. "You stayed alive." He didn't stay long. That was Kevin. No need for long speeches. But before he left, he dropped a 20 into the jar and tipped his hat. Just like that, he was gone. Later that afternoon, I found myself alone in the back alley behind the cafe. I'd brought out a small tin can, filled it with unsent letters I'd written months ago, letters to Verna, to Carlton, even one to Blaine. I never mailed them. They weren't for them anyway. One by one, I struck a match and dropped the pages in. The edges curled and blackened, and the words turned into smoke. Closure isn't always conversation, I whispered to myself. Sometimes it's silence. That evening, just before closing, Trina walked in. She didn't order anything, just looked around, walked slowly to the counter, and slipped something into the donation jar. A check. I didn't read the amount. She met my eyes, nodded once, then left. No words. That was enough. A week later, a postcard arrived. No return address, no message, just the photo of a mountaintop and one line written in blocky handwriting. You gave me the courage to come back. Nico. I pinned it on the bulletin board near the back door. Every day, new faces came into the cafe. People from all walks, old women who lost their sons, veterans dealing with more than just physical wounds, kids who'd been through too much before they could vote. They didn't come for coffee. They came because this was one of the few places in town where nobody asked, "What happened to you?" But everyone understood the answer. One of those faces was a 17-year-old girl named Taya. She came in one morning asking for a job, said she'd been in the foster system since she was 6. No resume, no references, but she had this look like she'd been building herself from ash for years. I hired her on the spot. Now she worked mornings with me, her earbuds always dangling from one ear, a streak of blue in her hair that didn't match anything but made her feel visible. Rose still came by every Sunday. She ran a quiet Bible reading in the corner booth. Sometimes 3 people joined, sometimes 10. No preaching, just presence. That's what we became known for, not the coffee, not the muffins, but presence, a place that didn't rush you, a place where you didn't have to prove anything. One morning, I stepped outside to wipe down the outdoor tables. A couple stood near the window, reading the lettering on the door. I watched as the woman tilted her head to read it aloud. "We are family when others walk away." She looked at her husband. "That's beautiful." He nodded, smiled. "It's more than beautiful. It's true." I went back inside, the sun warming my shoulders, the day still stretching out ahead of me. They took my blood, my time, my trust, but they didn't take my fire. They thought they buried me, but I was a seed, and this is what grew. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people who share your last name. This story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about survival, about rebuilding your life from the ground up, even when the people who were supposed to love you tried to bury you instead. What would you do if your own family decided you were expendable? Let me know in the comments. And if stories like this resonate with you, real, raw, and unforgettable, make sure to subscribe for more. Your support helps these voices be heard.